Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a problem that I think every single data professional knows all too well. We build dashboards to bring clarity, right? But what happens when they just create more noise? We're going to dig into why so many of our data dashboards fail, and more importantly, what we can actually do about it.
You know the ones I'm talking about. We've all seen them. Maybe we've even built a few of them. Dashboards that are just packed to the gills with charts. They look super impressive, but instead of insight, you just get data overload. And our stakeholders, they're left confused, which forces us to ask that tough question. Is there a better way to do this? A way to deliver real value?
And that, right there, is the heart of the problem. This is the dashboard dilemma. The issue is, we get stuck focusing on completely the wrong things.
For what feels like forever, we've obsessed over finding the perfect chart. You know, the one chart to rule them all. But it turns out that's just a red herring. It's a total distraction. The real game changer, the thing that actually moves the needle, is when we shift our focus from the visual itself and onto the user. When we start asking a much more powerful question. How do people actually need to interact with this data?
Okay, so how do we make that shift happen? Well, by adopting a completely new user-centric framework. Think of it like a diagnostic tool. Something that helps us decode how people really use data, not just how we think they do.
And look, this isn't just another boring UX checklist you have to tick off. The User Data Interaction Framework is a real method for getting inside your users' heads. It's all about analyzing how they consume information. It goes way beyond aesthetics, way beyond making things look pretty, and instead evaluates 4 key dimensions of their actual behavior. And that is what helps you build dashboards that lead to smarter, faster decisions.
All right, let's dive into this. The whole framework is built on what it calls 4 analytical dimensions. Let's break them down one by one.
First up is Dimension 1, aggregation level. This one's pretty intuitive, actually. It's all about how much detail your user really needs. Are we talking big picture summaries, or do they need to get down into the nitty-gritty? It's about how much we roll up the data before they even see it.
So what you get is this spectrum of need, right? On one end, you've got your high-level users. Think of your executives. They just want the top-line number, the monthly revenue headline. That's it. But on the complete opposite end, you have low-level users, like your analysts, who need to be able to dig into every single transaction log. And here's the kicker. The friction, the frustration, it all happens when we give the dashboard built for one type of user to the other.
So this is the question you have to ask yourself. Are you serving up these beautiful, high-level summaries to someone who's desperate to dig deep? Or are you just overwhelming a big picture thinker with a giant wall of granular data? That mismatch, man, that is such a classic source of dashboard frustration.
All right, moving on. The second dimension adds another really interesting layer to this. It's called temporal analysis. And the key question here is simple. Just how critical is time? How critical is historical context for your user?
And this really highlights a huge difference in how people work. Somebody with a high temporal need, they are all about spotting trends over time. Think year-over-year growth. But then you have someone with a low temporal need. They just need a static point-in-time snapshot. Like, what are our inventory levels right now? For them, what happened last year is almost totally irrelevant to the question they're trying to answer.
So asking this helps you figure out if you're actually telling the whole story. Or are you just giving them a single snapshot of today? Because if your users need to see the trend line and all you give them is one static picture, you're basically handing them one piece of a 1,000-piece puzzle. It's just not enough.
Okay, dimension number 3. Now this one's a big one. It's cross-data analysis. And this is all about how much your users need to connect the dots between totally different sets of information to get to those really deep, powerful insights.
What this really gets at is, do your users think in silos or do they think in systems? A high-need user, they're a systems thinker. They're constantly trying to combine sales data with, say, product usage data. But a low-need user, they're laser-focused on one data set at a time. And hey, neither approach is wrong. They just require completely different tools to do their jobs effectively.
And here is the ultimate test, the real litmus test. Ask yourself this. Are your users constantly exporting data from 2, 3, 4 different dashboards into a spreadsheet just to mash it all together? If the answer is yes, that is a 5-alarm fire. That's a blaring siren telling you there is a massive gap in your user experience.
All right, that brings us to our fourth and final dimension, non-temporal analysis. So if temporal was all about analyzing by time, this covers all the other ways users need to slice and dice data by factors other than time.
This dimension is all about revealing that need to segment, to slice and dice. A user with a high need here wants to break down their sales numbers by every possible factor that matters to the business. Demographics, product category, region, you name it. On the other hand, a low-need user, they're really just focused on the big, broad aggregates. Total global sales for last month.
The big word here is flexibility. If your dashboard is locked into one single, rigid view, you are almost certainly blocking your users from answering their most critical business questions. A lack of these kinds of filtering options, well, it can be a silent killer. It's what makes a dashboard feel useless, even if the data itself is perfect.
Okay, so now we've got the 4 dimensions: aggregation, temporal, cross-data, and non-temporal. That's great, but how do we actually put this thing to work?
Well, it's a pretty straightforward 4-step process. First, you've got to inventory your data. Just list out everything your users are accessing. Second, you evaluate each of those data sets against our 4 dimensions. Third, you rank and prioritize them. What's most important? What gets used most often? And finally, step 4, and this one is absolutely crucial. You analyze and adjust. This isn't a one-and-done thing. It has to be a living, breathing process that changes as the business needs change.
Once you start thinking this way, the framework gives you this brand new lens, a powerful set of questions you can use to evaluate any dashboard you have.
And really, it boils down to these 4 key questions. Is the aggregation level right? Does it support the time analysis they need? Can they connect the dots without manual work? And is it flexible enough? This becomes your new toolkit, and it completely shifts the conversation away from, hey, is this chart pretty, to the much more important question, does this thing actually serve a real user's need? That is how you build dashboards that drive action, not just more confusion.
So I'll leave you with a final thought, a challenge really. Think about your most important dashboard right now, the one everyone relies on. What's the one question from this framework that could totally transform it tomorrow? Which one holds the key to unlocking its real power? Because at the end of the day, making data work isn't about building the perfect chart. It's about understanding people.